finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you today from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey. Absolutely delighted to welcome Julie Boyer, who will be speaking to us from Vancouver Island. Julie, who is married and has an 11-year-old daughter, is the 7th inspiring interview in our Grief and Rebirth series. She's an intuitive business and health coach, an Amazon best-selling author, and the host of Wake Up with Gratitude podcast. Julie's remarkable grief and rebirth journey began after she survived a week-long coma due to a bacterial infection after her second miscarriage. We'll be talking today about how this experience taught Julie that every day is a gift and energized a new life mission within her, which is to inspire all of us to wake up with gratitude every single day. Before we begin, I must say that I totally relate to wake up with gratitude every single day. What a blessing. And Julie, my heartfelt welcome to Grief and Rebirth Podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you here. And thank you for offering to be a part of our Rebirth series. I think it's wonderful. I think a lot of people will be inspired by your story. So how about telling us what your life was like before you got so ill?
Well, first of all, thank you, Irene, for inviting me to be on your show. I really appreciate and honor the space and the time to share my story. And I think I'm going to take you with me to do my introduction wherever I go, because that was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit of my story and my background with your audience. And, before this happened, I have a daughter. She's now 11. And I struggled with endometriosis, which affects about 1 in 10 women. So getting pregnant in the first place and having a child is actually really amazing that I have one healthy child. And, we got pregnant the first time there, everything went well. So then we assumed that we would be okay to have a second child. And the second time I got pregnant, that ended in a miscarriage at 15 weeks. And, when you pass 12 weeks, you feel like, it's going to be fine. But that ended very traumatically. I went to the hospital, had a surgery, and then came home. And, I actually dealt with the grief from that experience by writing my first book, 30 Days of Gratitude. So we had kind of, settled in that we were going to have one child. And then we kind of had an oops, I got my dates wrong. And, and I basically knew the next day I was like, I'm pregnant for sure. I knew, because with endometriosis, sometimes you have pain with ovulation. So I kind of knew, I was like, yeah, exactly. It's happening right now. So
here we go. Maybe here we go. Good.
Yeah. So I knew I was pregnant, and, I was just more hesitant and wasn't sure. And made it to it was a couple days before 12 weeks. And I started to have some similar things happen that I'd had the time before. And so I knew what was happening. So, I went to the hospital. I went to the doctor who worked just across the street from the hospital, and he saw me and he said, yeah, unfortunately, you're having a miscarriage. But it's not complete yet or anything. And we can just send you home with some drugs and you can have the miscarriage at home. And I said, no, thank you. Because my first time I'd had a traumatic miscarriage at home, and which involved EMS and police breaking down the door.
I could just imagine.
Well, hopefully no, it's a really terrible.
Traumatic. I mean, I could just imagine how terrible that is. Yep.
It's a terrible thing. So I said, no, I want the same, procedure I had done the first time, because I was like, I'm not going through that again. Let's just have the procedure, take care of things, and then I can go home and I know I'll recover fine. And what ended up happening is that I had the procedure and then ended up getting very unwell, went back to the hospital the next day. They sent me home again. And the third time I went back to the hospital, I was so unwell. My heart was racing, but my blood pressure was really low and my oxygen was really low. And, they ended up admitting me. And within a couple of days, I was put into a medically induced coma, because they finally did some cultures and realized I had this invasive group A strep, which is a very serious, life-threatening infection.
Wow. So what happened with that? So you were in the hospital, you're in the coma. How long
Yeah.
were you in the coma?
So they put me in a medically induced coma for a week. And what happens when you're in a medically induced coma is you're not actually asleep all the time. They bring you out of it and put you back in and, to try and move you. Like, it's very interesting. I mean, I don't remember any of this. Of course, my husband just, he remembers.
And all of this time you're trying to get rid of this infection.
Yeah. Well, that was why they had to put me in the coma, because they needed to give me the medicine, and I had to be in this state because I was just in so much pain. I just couldn't handle it anymore. It's an interesting time right now when we first started talking about COVID and respiratory therapy and all these things and people being put in the ICU and a coma. Like, I lived that long before. So it was actually really triggering for me at the beginning of the pandemic.
Sure.
Yeah. Hearing about people like, I had respiratory therapy, like was essential for me to live. So yeah, they, the course of antibiotics, they had to do a double course, which ended up, after a few days, I kind of turned around, and then after a week, they woke me up, and, and I really I say now, I say that I really understand what it means to wake up with gratitude. And I do, when you
woke up because you were happy and glad to be alive, basically.
Yeah.
Was that the way you healed your trauma, just simply through gratitude, or were there other things that you did?
I mean, that's definitely quite a journey to go from that.
Tell us about that. Yeah.
So from,
and how you wrote your first book and that whole thing. I mean, you went through a lot. This is, and the book was one of your ways of healing too, right?
Yeah. So I'll touch back on the book because it was after the first miscarriage. So, miscarriage is unfortunately really, really common, and we don't talk about it a lot. And I like to talk and tell my stories now because I'm far enough away from them that the pain isn't the same at all. And I can speak about them and not, lose myself in the emotion of the story. And when that first one happened, I actually got a download to start writing this book. And I knew
how did you get that? People will want to know about that, Julie.
Okay.
Did you wake up with the message, or did it come into your head, or how did you?
Well, the night that I came home from the hospital that first time, because I was just in the hospital for the afternoon, and I came home from the hospital, and, that at that point, that had been the worst day of my life. But I still pulled out my gratitude journal, and I wrote in my gratitude journal.
Wow.
So I said to myself, if I can write in my gratitude journal on what was the worst day of my life, I need to start sharing this gratitude practice, because I'd already been using gratitude kind of in my business, with some coaching I was doing and some work with my team. But so what happened was I had the idea for the book name, and what would happen is I would go for a walk. I drop my daughter to take the bus in the morning, and I go for a walk in the woods, just a short walk through a neighborhood, and the chapter would download.
Wow.
And then I get home and start writing.
Wow. So I want to know what you had to be grateful for on the worst day of your life. What did you write into your gratitude journal that day?
So I wrote that I was grateful my daughter was at daycare. She only went to daycare part-time. She was quite young. She was just about 2.5. So she only went a couple days a week. So I was grateful that she wasn't home, because I was home. I was grateful. I just couldn't imagine if she had been there,
Sure.
That was the trauma for her. Then I was also grateful that the police were able to break down my front door. Because I was home alone and I was in the tub, they needed to break down the front door. And then I was grateful for the care I'd received at the hospital. It all happened so fast. I literally went in for surgery in between 2 surgeries. I got to the operating room and I didn't even have, I still had my ring on. They're like, why do you still have jewelry on? You didn't even sign the consent form.
Wow.
That's how it happened so fast.
Was your husband there at that time, or he was racing to the hospital?
So he had met me at the hospital, but at that time, we didn't know that I was going for surgery. So he's like, well, I'm just going to pop home. It was only a few minutes away. Actually, we're very lucky. I'm going to pop home. I'm going to clean up the bathroom, which, I don't know how
That's
many.
That's something to be grateful for too.
It is, but it's interesting. We don't talk about men and trauma and miscarriage, because I guarantee you there is unresolved trauma for my husband, who had to deal with that. And then nobody talks to him and asks him how he's doing, right? Ever. So that's why he wasn't there. So he comes back to the hospital and his wife is in surgery. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you send out daily gratitude reminders via email to hundreds of people worldwide, don't you? Is that what you're doing?
I did that for 2 years. So after the book came out, I did send a daily gratitude reminder for 2 years. This was in 2013. So in 2013, social media wasn't the same. We really didn't have the same connections as we do with people live today. So for 2 years, and it's interesting that you bring that up, because I don't know if you read this on my website or something, but the second time I was hospitalized, which was a year and a half later, almost 2 years later, my husband at that time, he's still my husband the whole time.
Right. We're keeping him.
Yeah, we're keeping him. So he was doing, he was inputting the daily gratitude reminders into the email service. So I would do like 2 or 3 weeks worth ahead of time on a Word document. And then my husband would then go and log in and enter them, for the daily emails. And then they would go out every day. So the craziest thing happened, he tells me the only time he really cried when I was in the hospital was that he went home one night from the ICU and did my gratitude reminders for me. So then the gratitude reminders kept going out. And so my list didn't even know, which a lot of them were really good.
You were almost dying. Yeah.
They didn't know because it kept going. And it only stopped after I got out of the hospital.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Wow. So how, with all of this that went on,
yes,
like, wow, how did you rebirth yourself? What did you do? How did you transit from all of this? Okay, you've got your gratitude practice, but you also invested in yourself and your business. And this I really want to hear about, ending some of your toxic relationships and living with more gratitude. So tell us how your life evolved from all of this. Yeah. And a lot of people struggle with ending their toxic relationships. And did you start to end these relationships because you realized, I'm grateful to be alive, I don't want these people in my life anymore? What was all that about too?
I would say that came a little bit later in my journey, for sure. After I got out of the hospital, I definitely had a lot more people in my life that were loving and caring. So that was really important to me to have those people in my life. I did have an incident, with a friend shortly after that happened, which was really unfortunate, but it wasn't really related to my own healing and trauma. But it was kind of a 2 years after the, being in the hospital and being in a medically induced coma and all that, and waking up, was kind of when I realized that, I'd always had this mission of, I dream of a world where everyone, wakes up with gratitude. And it took me 2 years after being sick I'd had like a list of affirmations and daily habits that I wanted to have in my life. I had it on the wall of my bathroom. And the last thing on the list says, I want to wake up with gratitude every day. And one day, I'm just like on the toilet, like looking at my list. And all of a sudden I was just like, oh my gosh, that's my brand. Because I'd been in business already for over a decade, and my brand was.
What had you done? You're talking about the business with gratitude, or
Wake Up with Gratitude. Mm-hmm. And so I was Julie Boyer in business, but I wanted to like bring my story of going through this major trauma and still being able to do a gratitude practice into my business. And so, there was that moment I just sat there and I looked at the list and I went, oh my gosh, that is what I do. It's Wake Up with Gratitude. And then of course, what you do is you first make sure that URL is available.
Right.
And it was. And that was, that's where the beginning of the like sharing the gratitude journey further went. And of course, as I started to want to explore and grow, my gratitude business, and not just my, I have another business in nutrition and health and well-being, which was critical to my.
Tell us about that too.
Yeah, well, that was critical to my physical healing for sure. It's somewhat my mental, but really like the fact that I, recovered with no permanent, and like you would never know. And I started this Wake Up with Gratitude business, and then I invested in some coaching. for mindset, for financial mindset, all these things to try and really understand how I could get my message of gratitude to a wider audience, because that's really what my deepest desire is to keep that message getting to more and more people. And so, a really interesting part in my healing journey is, about a year after I started the brand, which still was just a blog at the time, I was feeling down on myself. I was having a hard time, going through a difficult time. And so it was really cool. I think your audience, I'm sharing these little signs because I think your audience appreciates
First
that.
of all,
right?
I think they will all love this whole idea of waking up with gratitude, no matter what's going on. I think you're so inspiring to everyone, and talking about getting your message out. This is a wonderful vehicle for getting your message out. I'm thrilled for both of us. So go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So I was at the beach one day and I saw, people paint rocks, and the rock was painted and it said self-love. And I was like, so I did this. I decided to do this thing called 30 Days of Self-Love, where I interviewed people in my life and I did a video and saved the audio. And it was a video series. And I was asking them, what do they do for self-love? And that was also a big part of my own healing journey, because as I interviewed other people and asked them what they were doing, then I started to adopt some of their habits into my own life. And that project, which was a video project initially, I took the audio from that project, and then that became the beginning of my podcast. And, when I think about my healing journey, the podcast has actually been a really big part of it. Listening to other people's stories, learning different ways to practice gratitude. And honestly, Irene, I've been doing this podcast for over 2 years now, as it's just one of the things that I do. But I find that especially in the past year, I spend a lot of my day thinking about gratitude, talking about gratitude, and practicing gratitude.
That's wonderful. You know what? Considering what so many people are going through, feeling sequestered with COVID and all of that, and to be able to still see a silver lining and have gratitude for certain things. I'm the same way, Julie, and it really changes the way you approach life and tell me and all that. But I really want to hear about these toxic relationships. Who did you decide was out, and who did you decide was still in, and what was all that about?
That was a tough one. I had a falling out with a friend who had really been there for me when I was sick in the hospital. Very much don't know what we would have done without this friend. And then about 7 months later, this friend needed a place to stay for, kind of an indefinite amount of time. And so I said yes to this person staying in our home. Now I at that time did not understand that I'm a highly sensitive person. I'm also very introverted, and I need a lot of space and time and quiet. And having another person who was going through their own very difficult, very dark time in my house as an empath, and I hesitate to use that word, but I
brought the
really
vibration all the way down.
Yes.
Right.
So it made it very, very difficult. And so I did something that was very, very hard, and there was irreparable damage to the friendship. I had to ask the friend to leave without them really having a place to go. And that was one of the hardest friendship goodbyes I've ever had. But now I look back and say, if I hadn't said now, it's time to go, and heard it at that point, it could have gotten so much worse.
You took care of yourself.
And my family, because my daughter, we now know, is also highly sensitive and very empathic. She feels people's energy. So that was a very hard breakup of a friendship.
How is this person now? Is she okay? Do you know?
Yeah. She is thriving. Absolutely. This was many years ago. This person is thriving, doing absolutely fantastic. Our friendship.
Maybe you did her a favor by getting her to really see things in a different way.
You know what? I have no idea. And I'm not sure that I'm not sure or not. And I know I hurt that person. Like I know I hurt them. And I acknowledge that. And I reached out many years later and apologized, and also reached out with reflection saying, I didn't really understand what you were going through. And I think now in reflection, I can see how hard things were for you. So I also, did my best to kind of try and just say, I can see it from your perspective better now with time and distance. But
Right.
yeah,
Right. And has this also been with other relationships that you had?
I think
I find that when people change,
Yeah.
the reason I'm asking you is
Yeah.
because it also
You
has
change.
happened to me. As you change, your relationships change. Certain people who you really resonate with at one point in your life, this is just Irene's take. Certain people who you really resonate with one point in your life, you change or they change, and you're no longer a vibrational match with them anymore. It's not personal, it's just changed.
Yeah, I mean, that happened with a really good friend, during the pandemic. And only partly because we live on very different sides of the spectrum. And we were not able to, I felt like this person was pushing their agenda on me. And I was like, I'm, content with my decisions to follow the science. And that's how I feel. And I'm not changing that. And that wasn't the only thing, but this friend felt that they were no longer able to be themselves around me. And I was like, well, that's okay. I'm like, we're breaking up. And it was hard because our lives were really intertwined. And I actually walked away from a community, and I wouldn't say that the community itself was a toxic community. It just wasn't healthy for me to be in that community.
Right. It wasn't
The
right
community itself continues, and the people that are in that community it's working for them. But I had been a part of that community for over a year, and it wasn't serving me anymore. And I felt an obligation to be there as opposed to a desire. And, the thinking of the leadership in that community and my thinking were just not aligned. And it did end up being a gift. It gave me space in my day to explore other relationships. It gave me more, a lot of things happened at the same time that allowed me to have a lot of creative outlet and really come into my own. And all of this kind of has happened in the past, I don't know, like 7 or 8 months. So the latter half of 2021.
I always find that when things like that happen, and it's not done to be mean or anything, when you take care of yourself like that, it opens up space for new things to come in for you. Tell everybody about your business and how they can connect with you. Tell them what you do, because you're just lovely. I'm just seeing behind you these beautiful photographs that you've done yourself and all. And you live on Vancouver Island, which is so stunning. How about telling us all about, because part of your rebirth is you invested in yourself and your business.
Yes, absolutely. So I am a multi-passionate entrepreneur, and I do a lot of different things. And
tell us all about it.
What I love, Irene, what I love is that we live in a time and a place where you can do different things and have different aspects of your personality. And that's okay. I don't have to be just one thing for everybody. And I'm happy with that. I have spent almost 16 years in a business where I help my clients with their nutrition and supplementation. I call myself an intuitive business and health coach because a lot of the work that I do is really intuitive, especially when it comes around nutrition and supplementation. Like when I connect with a client, after having a short conversation, I usually will get an intuitive download. I will actually see what they need in my head. I will see a picture of it, and I'll say, this is what I'm, getting. And of course it has to do with having, worked with thousands of clients, but it also, like, I just allow my intuition.
Have you always been intuitive like that? From when you were a kid?
I think that I've always seen the world in pictures in my head. And I didn't know, I really didn't know that was like, that's not how everyone saw
It's
the world.
clairvoyance, right? And it's great.
I was just assumed everybody, I have this trick that I use, for example, when meeting someone new, I will visualize their name in my head, like how they spell it. So I'll ask someone always, remember the time when we met people in person?
Right.
So I ask, how do you spell your name? And then I visualize a picture of their name in my mind. And that's how I remember it. And it didn't dawn on me for years that not everybody sees pictures in their So was I like this as a kid? I'm not sure, but I know for definitely a very long time, I do get pictures and downloads into my mind, and I see them ahead of time.
You hear words when you get downloads. You hear words, or you get messages, or
it's more pictures for sure. Yeah,
that's so fascinating and so wonderful, just so wonderful.
Yeah.
So tell us about your businesses and tell us how we can connect with you.
Yes. So the nutrition business, so that I connect with clients, I do one-on-one consultations, and I also sometimes run group workshops and programs that, really are all about your entire well-being and wellness. So that's one part of what I do. The next part of what I do is as a podcast host. So the Wake Up with Gratitude podcast, which is available wherever you want to listen to your podcast. I've been podcasting for over 2 years. We hit a pretty exciting milestone. We hit over 100,000 downloads just a few weeks ago. And I'm really proud of that. And I'm proud that the podcast is growing. Thank you. And I just love it. So it's a weekly podcast. And then I'm also a landscape photographer, as you see by the photos behind me. And what I did with my photography was I have my book, 30 Days of Gratitude, and my photography, and I made them into a set of cards, and they're thank you cards or gratitude cards. They're meant to go with the book, but a lot of people just like to buy the cards on their own. And they're pictures of things, the sunsets and other things, more sunrises, and different pictures that I've taken here while living on Vancouver Island. So my main website is wakeupwithgratitude.com. I love social media. I enjoy being on social media. The easiest way to find me on the socials is my name, Julie, and then my middle initials, which are CM, like Mary, and my last name, Boyer. So Julie CM Boyer on all the socials. And honestly, these days, Irene, I'm hanging out on TikTok a lot. I'm having a really good time on TikTok.
Yeah, I'm thinking of going on to TikTok. It sounds like a lot of fun.
Oh, I think you'd be great on it, Irene.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. And give a message for everyone about the value and the importance of healing and rebirth, Julie, having done it yourself.
Irene, the biggest thing is to say yes to doing the work. I have definitely had a tremendous amount of healing, especially in the last year. And I said yes to doing the work. And even when it was hard, and the gratitude, the piece around gratitude is that when you have a really solid gratitude practice, while you're doing the work, while you're healing, your gratitude practice allows you to stay grounded and to look for things to be grateful for. I'm not grateful for spending a week in a medically induced coma, but I'm grateful that, I woke up from that, and I couldn't even hold my phone because I'd lost so much muscle tone.
Wow.
And so I'm grateful that I have that memory and that I can hold my phone and be like, there was a time when I couldn't put my phone in my hand and I couldn't type any messages. So as we say yes to doing the work, our gratitude practice allows us to get through it and to stay grounded and not get, we want to do the work, but we don't want to live there.
Right. Well, you have people who I call them Debbie Downers. Instead of being grateful, they're constantly complaining about everything's supposed to be perfect and all of that. And yours is so much of a better way to face life. And would you say this is your tip for finding joy in life, to find gratitude with everything that happens in your life?
You know what, Irene? Joy is my word of the year for 2022. I decided that'd be my word of the year. And I wrote, I'm looking just to the right here because I've written it down, and I said, This is a quote that I've got that reminds me of why joy is so important to me. And it says, joy is what happens to us when we allow ourselves to recognize how good things really are. And that's Marianne Williamson. And that to me is where joy and gratitude intersect. Right? It's recognizing that like right in front of you, that you already have so much to be thankful for that you're just forgetting about because it's there all the time. Listen, Irene, you know, I'm sure you've had storms where you've lost electricity. And the next day you're like, oh, I can turn the lights on. I can the stove work, like all right. And it lasts for a moment. What if every day, you know, you had joy when you turned on a light or opened a faucet and water came out? That the two intersect so well together. That's really what my feeling around joy is that intersection between joy and gratitude.
It's so funny. It's so interesting because I resonate so with you, Julie, because as everyone knows who listens to the podcast, I had this terrible car accident and I lost my husband and all these things happened to me. But I lived. And I have this podcast now. Today I'm meeting Julie and I'm having just a lovely time getting to know you. And I have grandchildren and I'm enjoying them and all of that. So I feel that gratitude too. I could really sit on the pity pot all the time too, but I don't.
And if it's okay, I'd love to share just one more thing about grief and gratitude.
Yes, please do.
Because grief is a very important emotion, and it's an important emotion for us to feel and to have. And gratitude actually isn't meant to take away grief. And sometimes we can be in grief and also find gratitude. And I say that grief and gratitude can live in the same house, meaning that you can be in a period of loss and of pain, and which right now, going into 2 years of coronavirus pandemic, there isn't a soul on this earth that doesn't have something that they are grieving the loss of. If it is not of a human life that they know, they have lost many, many things. So we can grieve those losses. And then at the same time, we can find things that we are grateful for. I am tremendously grateful for my health. I work in health and nutrition and well-being and wellness. And just that, being able to just say, I am grateful to be healthy right now, like that is not to be taken for granted.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And not only that, with your healthy body, which was so unhealthy at one point, and with your healthy body, you're here inspiring other people.
Yeah.
And giving them a different way to approach their lives, which is just wonderful. I'm really grateful that you offered to share your story of healing rebirth with us today, because I think it's special and I think you're really special, Julie. And I want to thank you so much from my heart for this interview. It's truly a pleasure to get to know you. And here's a reminder, everyone, that you can see the show notes and all Grief and Rebirth podcast episodes on ireneweinberg.com. And make sure to follow us and like us on social at Irene S. Weinberg, on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and especially on YouTube. Like, subscribe, and hit notify to make sure you'll get the inspiring new interviews like this one with Julie coming your way. And if you'd like to be part of this Rebirth series, please send me an email to hello@ireneweinberg.com. As I like to say, to be continued, many blessings, and bye for now. So I need to tell everyone that Julie and I were having a wonderful conversation after our interview, and she started to say that she had a communication with Jesus while she was in the hospital, right?
Yep.
And I perked right up and I said, oh, wait a minute. I want to hear all about that. And I'll bet you our Grief and Rebirth audience also would love to. So Julie, would you share that with us? You were in your coma?
I was in my coma. I remember I mentioned earlier in the interview that you kind of go in and out, like you're not like 100% asleep all the time. But what happened was I heard Jesus's voice in my mind, and he said to me, we've heard all your prayers and you're going to be out of the hospital in 2 days.
Wow.
So
How did you recognize his voice? It was just, you just knew.
I just knew it was weird. I'd had a lot of like choral music in my head at the time. I should preface this, at that time in my life, I attended church on a regular basis. I was very involved with my local, Catholic church. I taught Sunday school for the kids. I attended mass every Sunday. So it was definitely a very big part of my life. It is no longer the same today. I've moved. I don't live in that community anymore. But at the time, I very much had a very deep faith. And, so that I think obviously probably was part of it, is that I already had this faith. But yeah, I heard the voice and he said those words, like, we heard all the prayers from all your friends and you're going to be home in 2 days. And then I had another vision, but it was so real. I tell you, like, it was so real. So
at the same time or another day?
I don't honestly, like, I don't know what days or whatever, but I know, like, I remembered them clearly when I was back to full consciousness. So this time, I was in his arms and I was being rocked in his arms. And I was in front of like a building, this like white building with these arches, which later I found out, I was looking through some old magazines and it was the cover. It was this healing center that exists in real life in Mexico. So in my like out of body
vision, never seen it in reality. But
no. And I didn't even, I didn't know what it looked like. I just, years later, I'm going through these piles of magazines and it's on the cover. And I was like, oh, that was the place where Jesus was.
Wow.
So he was, rocking me in his arms. And again, telling me I was going to be completely healed. I was going to be out of the hospital in 2 days. And I just knew it. And I remember telling the nurse in the ICU, like when I woke up again, I was like, and I'm sure she thought I was completely hallucinating, but it was real. It was real. It happened.
And I do believe it was real.
I mean, we're almost 8 years later now, and it is as clear as I can be there in a moment. Mm-hmm. And then the last sort of out of body experience I had during this, time being in the coma, in this experience, I felt myself leave and felt my spirit actually in Mexico, I think, like it was a beach in Mexico. And my friends were there. And I actually think in real life, they were in Mexico because it was the holiday season. And I was, just there with them. Like they were on vacation and my spirit was there. Like I was walking on the beach with them. I was with them. I never told them after that. Actually, I might have, because I had some I sent a lot of weird voice texts because remember I was mentioning I couldn't use my phone, and then I remember being whisked back and just coming back, in and being again, kind of. That
was a little bit of a near death experience, I think, that you had.
It was definitely, I only recognized that years later when I was telling someone the story and they're like, so you left your body. And I was like, well, it felt like it. I did do an interview with a friend who also went through a near-death experience after giving birth. Her child survived. And this was after, having a miscarriage. Right. And anyway, so that was my experience and it really
changes your life. That's like when I got the message when they pulled me out of the car. It changes your life.
It does. It really, and even though my faith is different today, it doesn't mean my faith is just, it's so strong. And I understand that there's so much we don't understand. And so you asked a little bit about my intuition. Having that experience allowed me to be more open to, gifts and things that might come through.
Yeah, I think that's pretty wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm really glad we came back to hear about that. That's wonderful. Thank you, Julie, from my heart. To be continued. And bye for now. Mwah.